Today we're going to be learning Masechet Gittin Daf Nun. We're going to be starting with a quick review of where we ended yesterday. We were talking about Ktubat Isha Beziburit, that the woman gets her Ktuba money from the worst quality land. Then we asked, but Marzutra came and said, this is only talking about when she collects it from the orphans. When she collects from the husband, she actually gets average land. Okay, not the worst, not the best, but the average. Now, because she's like a Baal Chov, like a regular person who's owed money. They brought a bunch of questions against Marzutra in the context of the third question. Each one they answered. In the context of the third question, they explained that our Mishnah is talking about a case of an arev, of someone who is a guarantor, which we had a bit of a question. A guarantor doesn't actually take responsibility for a loan, which was a little bit strange. We didn't really understand. And then they said, well, it's a type of called a kabbalan, a type of guarantor that does accept responsibility. So then we basically are now going to talk about this issue of the guarantors, and then we're going to come back to Marzutra, ask a fourth question on Marzutra, and actually end with a difficulty against him. So it says at the bottom of Mem Tet Bet, Itmar, Arev Diktuba Divrei Akol Lo Mishtab. In Arev of a Ktuba, everyone agrees there's no shiabud. Okay, you're not responsible. Okay? And this is what we talked about. In Arev of a Ktuba, we still don't know yet why. And everyone also agrees Kabbalan Dibal Chov Divrei Akol Mishtab. But the kabbalan, someone who accepts upon themselves of any kind of loan or anything you're owed to someone, everyone agrees a kabbalan definitely accepted responsibility for a regular type of loan. But arev de bal chov, a kabbalan de tuba plike. But there's a machloket about the arev, a regular guarantor, the bottom level, the lower level one of a debtor, someone who owes money, and a kabbalan of a ktuba. What's the debate? Well, some who say, even if the lova has no money, the borrower has no money at all. Mishtabed, still, because it was an arev, the lower level, but for a Baal Chov, for a debtor, or a kabbalan of a ktuba, because he accepted it more. So even though the guy doesn't have any money, he was still willing to accept it upon himself. The guarantor. But there's another opinion that says if he has money, then the guarantor, again, kabbalan or arev, depending on which one, will accept it. And if the lovad, though, doesn't have any money, if the person he's vouching for doesn't have any money, then he doesn't really mean it. Okay, again, he was just trying to encourage the other guy to do it, but without any real intent of ever paying the money, because why would you do that, right, if the guy doesn't have any money? So again, what's the point of a guarantor? If it doesn't work, it's a good question. But they claim that this kind of person is really not accepting upon themselves. Now they say the hilchata bekulu, and the halacha is by all these cases, really in all these situations other than one, they really do, the arev and the kabbalan accept responsibility. Okay, so the halacha is even if the debtor has no money, doesn't matter, they accepted it, except for one exception, and that's what we saw in yesterday's daf. Bar me'arev de ktuba, other than the arev of ktuba. Why is that? Because even if he has money, okay, this is the reverse. Even when the lover has money, he definitely is not mishtabed. Okay, he never really intended. He was just signing on. Now, my timer. So why would, again, if he was a kabbalan, yes, but if he was an arev and he signed at the lower level guarantor, he didn't really mean it. So why did he do it, and why wouldn't he mean it? My timer. Number one, he was just trying to do a mitzvah. In other words, it's a good thing to get married. Whether you use mitzvah in the term, there's really a mitzvah to get married, or maybe a mitzvah that they have children, or maybe just mitzvah in the sense, we like to always use this in the colloquial way. Oh, it's a mitzvah. It's a good thing to do. He was doing this because it's a good thing to do to make sure the marriage happens. So he said, yeah, I'll be a guarantor on the ketubah. But lomidi chasra, it's not like a real transaction happened here. It's not like she paid money, right, like in a loan. So someone puts up money. She didn't lose anything here. And we already learned, which we're going to read again in a minute, which is women would always rather get married. So it's not like he really needed to guarantee it so that the woman would get married. The woman was happy to get married anyway. She's happy for financial security, even if her financial security isn't guaranteed forever. Okay. So again, the whole point of the ketubah is, yes, to guarantee her financial situation, but chances that we get to the arev are slim anyway. So basically, he didn't really mean. And that's the uniqueness of the ketubah. Again, uniqueness of the law of the arev by ketubah, which really isn't mishabed. Might Amar Ravina. Now we're getting to the fourth question against Mar Zutra. Again, Mar Zutra said, Tubat Isha, she collects her tuba money from the worst of the land, but only when she's collecting from orphans. If she collects from her husband because he divorced her, then she gets from average land like any other creditor. Tashma meikar detaknin yoter. Okay, so now they say, what's at the root of this takana? That Tubat Isha is beziburit, with the worst land. More than the man wants to get married. By the way, notice it doesn't say the man doesn't want to get married, but it just says more than the fact that men want to get married, women want to get married. Okay, there's obviously a desire on all parts to get married, but in those days, the women have much more incentive, again, for financial reasons, mainly. Could say emotional also, but probably more financial. Now, if you say, okay, wait, connect this with ketubah. Therefore, they said, ziburit is fine because we don't need to encourage women to get married. They anyway want to get married. So we can give her from the ziburit, and the other direction is we want to get the men to marry the women. So, ketubah isha b'ziburit. Let's just make it easier for him. Yes, he has to commit all this money, but at least he knows it'll come from his worst land. So, if you're going to say miyatme, haimishum diatmehu, well, then the takana doesn't make any sense. The takana is for the man himself and his orphans, but either way, either he's going to have to pay or the orphans are going to have to pay. And it seems like the takana is ziburit across the board. And if the whole reason was because, let's say, 50% of the time, or maybe even more, because divorce wasn't maybe so common, the ketubah is going to be paid out when the husband dies, in which case it's orphans, then it should have said the reason for the takana is because of orphans. But we saw before in the Braita that the reason for the takana is because men are less likely to want to get married than women. So why don't we just say because of Yatomim? So it really sounds like Mar Zutra is not right. And in fact, Tiyuvta de Mar Zutra Tiyuvta. They actually say we're going to be left with a question against Mar Zutra. Now we're going to have another statement of Mar Zutra. Amar Mar Zutra Bered Rav Nachman Mishmei de Rav Nachman. He's the son of Rav Nachman. He says in the name of his father. Shtarchov hayotze al Yatomim. If let's say I'm an orphan, and I have an IOU that I took out a loan from someone while I was an orphan, even if I committed in the document that I will pay you from the best of my land, shevach here means idit, the best of my land, you can still only collect from me from the worst of my land because I'm an orphan. And my commitment is meaningless, which is very strange. And we're going to see that Rava really doesn't like this. But hold off. So Amar Abai. Abai is now going to prove this statement of Mar Zutra from a different case. Teda, you should know, and this is your proof, he says the following. Let's look at on a basic Torah level. Let's go back to the first case. I stipulated, I'm an orphan. I stipulated I will pay you with my best land. I don't have to, even though that's what I stipulated. Now let's go compare it to a regular case. A normal person who owes money pays with average land. And that's the basic law. An orphan pays with the worst land. So what do you see here? Even though there's basic law, there's exceptions made for orphans. So even in our case, when the basic law is you wrote it in your contract, you have to keep it. The fact is we can drop you down to ziburit because that's the rules for orphans. Just like the basic law for a Baal Chov is average land, and therefore we drop the orphan down to ziburit, and that's okay. So it's okay here too. Amalei Rava says, what are you talking about? Hachi Ashta? You're comparing apples and oranges. Baal Chov dinabi ta'oraita b'ziburit. Well, it's not this law where I made a condition in my contract with you that I will pay you the best. That means by Torah law, I have to pay you the best. So how could the rabbis all of a sudden come and say I could pay you the worst? So Mar Zutra doesn't seem to have a problem with that. Abai says it's not a problem because it's just like the Baal Chov. The Baal Chov baseline is Benoni, and yet we drop it to ziburit. Comes Rav and he says, what are you talking about? The baseline for Baal Chov is actually ziburit. By Torah law, you actually have to only give the worst. The rabbis came and said, upped it to Benoni, which means that the orphans, when we drop them down to Benoni, to ziburit, from the worst land, from the average land, when you're a regular creditor, well, basically, it's just really keeping the Torah law. We're just saying this extra they added for Baalei Chov is to get you to Benoni. But we won't add that for the orphans. That's very different than saying you committed to something and on a Torah level, you're obligated the best and we're going to drop you down to the worst. That doesn't make sense. So let's read it inside and understand better. First of all, how do we know the Baal Chov on a Torah level is ziburit? Ula, as Ula says, the Amar Ula, Dvar Torah Baal Chov is ziburit, shene'emar, as it says in a pasuk. B'chutz ta'amo v'ha'ish, etc. This is a pasuk talking about if somebody owes you money and you go to collect. When you go to their house to collect the money, stand outside. Okay, the pasuk says, it's very in chapter 24, verse 11. Stand outside, and the person who owes you money will come bring you an avot hachutza. An avot seems to be a collateral. Okay, they don't have the money, let's say, they'll bring you something. And then it says you can't keep it at night, you have to give it back to them every night. And anyway, some more laws about that. But the main thing it says is stand outside his house. Don't go to his house and choose your own collateral. Let him give you what he wants to give you. Now, if you give the choice to the poor person to choose what they want to give you, or the person who borrowed the money, if you're going to give someone a collateral, you're going to give them the worst of what you have, because you know you might never see this again. He might take that instead of your loan if you default on the loan. So because of that, we're going to learn it from the ish. Just like here, he takes out collateral to pay back, and he brings the worst. Therefore, any Baal Chov can bring the worst. Then you have to explain why did the rabbis up it to Benonit? We already learned this. We didn't want them to close doors to borrowers and no one would lend money if they knew that they're only going to get back the bad land. So because of that, they upped it. So back to our point, what does Rava say? But when it comes to Yatomim, we're just putting it back to the base Doraita law of Ziburit. That's again not the same about Hacha, but in our case, if the orphan promised the best of the land, so the Yatomim should have to pay the best of the land if that's what they promised, because Torah law there is the best. So he doesn't like the comparison that Abaye makes to a regular Baal Chov, because really a regular Baal Chov, by basic law, really only has to give the worst. Ule Rava, now they say, wait a minute, we're going to raise a question on Rava and then we'll resolve it. V'hatane Avram Choza'ah. Avram Choza'ah had a brayta that said the following. You can only collect from orphans from the worst of the land, even if they are people who damaged others, which means what? What's the Torah law for damaging others? Idit, the best. So why do the orphans not have to pay the best? This seems to prove our bias point, that even though Torah law says the best, we can drop them down to ziburit, just like in the case where you made a condition. Right? That's a Torah law. To which they answer, the case must be, okay, this goes back to what we saw with Rabbi Yishmael, that when does the Yitom get to pay ziburit? Let's say I'm an orphan and I damage someone's property. So if my ziburit is equal to their best land, right, is equal to my worst land, then I can pay my worst land because it's equal to their best land. Now remember, that's what Rabbi Yishmael said is the base Torah law. Then, right, on Torah law, I only have to pay the best of their land. Remember, there were two ways to understand this. So we're going to go by Rabbi Yishmael's understanding, that the whole tikkun olam was to say I have to pay by my edit. Now let's go to those orphans. So I'm an orphan. By Torah law, by rabbinic law, I have to pay the best. But Torah law says the worst. So let's just revert back to Torah law, and then we don't have an issue. So this is how Rava resolves the question, right? Again, in this case, we're going to say, you don't have to pay the Edi because that's the Torah law. So if we understand it that way, we can read the Braita that fits in with Rava. Now they say, wait a minute. Ini, is that really true? Vahatane Rabbi Eliezer Niotah. Apparently he was from Niot or something. Now, this sounds still strange. Not sure what this means. You can only collect from the ziburit, even if it's idit. So what does that mean? Maya filu hein idit. Lav apagav dichtiv idit b'shtara. This seems to go against what we just said, which is, it sounds more like Mar Zutra and Abaye, because it sounds like it's saying you can only collect from ziburit, even mina idit. What does mean even mina idit? Even if they promise to pay with the idit. Then they would go against Rava and prove Abaye and Mar Zutra. To which they say, la, la, la. We could just understand that some other way. My idit, shvai idit. This is a strange term. Not sure what it means. There's a lot of different interpretations. We'll go with the interpretation that says this is actually worse than ziburit. Okay, why it's called shvai idit? Good question. What it means is, let's say you have land right next to the water. Now, it could be bad land, but it's actually worse than bad land because the water comes up and sometimes washes away whatever you have going on there. So it's like the worst of the worst. So what does it mean here? Now let's read back. You can only collect from the worst land, and even if it's worse than the worst land, it's the shva'idit. Now, how do we know that shva'idit is this worst land? Kidarava, as Rava says, the Amarava, hizik ziburit. Okay, now we're on a different topic, but we're going to show here what shva'idit is, and we're going to see that shva'idit is worse than ziburit. We're talking about a different thing, which is I damaged your property, and I damaged your worst land. Now, if I damage your worst land, it doesn't make a difference. I still have to pay idit. That's what we learned. So hizik ziburit, govem idit. I have to pay from the best. Again, best of your land or best of my land, that's the whole thing. But I have to pay from best. But shva'idit, govem benonit. But if I drop down a level and I damage your property, which was right by the water that was getting ruined all the time anyway, then I haven't caused damage in such a way that's normal damage. So we drop me down a level and I don't have to pay from the best of my land, I pay from the average land. So in that case, we've proven that shva'idit is worse than ziburit, and then it doesn't mean what we thought it meant, and therefore Rava can respond to the question. It's actually not a question, and it doesn't clearly prove Abaye and Mar Zutra's position. V'gabei yatme, and again, right, so shva'idit govem benonit, and then again, v'gabei yatme, so what does this mean? Govem ziburit, right? You can gabei yatme, ukma Rabbanan adoraita. Now we go back and we explain. Therefore, again, Rava is saying, when it comes to Yatomim, Ziburit is the base Torah law. And that's why they pay Ziburit. And when it comes to, if they promise, though, that they'll pay Edit, then by Torah law, they have to pay Edit. Because Mar Zutra and Abaye don't think that that's the case. Moving on in the Mishnah. Let's just do a summary of what we did so far. So right now, we talked about the Arev and the Kablan, two different types, right? And what the differences are, and in which case we'll disagree. We even had a psikat halakha, even though there were some debates, but then we concluded who's responsible for what and in what scenario, right? If the person has money or if they don't have money. Then we went back to ask another question on Mar Zutra's position that Ktubad Isha Ziburit only when she's returning to the orphans and not to the husband. But Ravina brought another question. We're really seeing clear from the Braita we saw the other day that the whole reason for the takana has nothing to do with orphans, and it's only because of it's really to get them married in the first place, and it seems to be irrelevant, and Mar Zutra seems to be wrong. Then we took this other statement of Mar Zutra of a shtar chov, and we had Mar Zutra and Abaye who basically hold that if the Yatomim promise Edit, they don't even have to pay Edit. Abaye tried to prove it from the Baal Chov. Rava said that's not a proof because the Baal Chov on Torah law really only needs the worst land. And it's the rabbis that insisted, so we just get rid of, anytime there's a rabbinic thing, we get rid of that when it comes to Yatomim, but Torah law, base Torah law, they have to keep, which would mean if they promised Edit, they'd have to pay Edit. That's Rava's approach. And now we're moving to Ein Efrim Nechsei Yatomim Elam Ziburit. This appears in the Mishnah, right? That you can only collect from the Yatomim, from the Ziburit, from the worst land, as we've been discussing, by Rav Achtavoy Bar Ami. So now Rav Achtavoy Bar Ami asked the following question: Yatomim Shamru Ktanim Afilu Gdolim. Are we talking when we say orphans, young orphans, or even if they're older and they're orphans? Okay, is it that they're so young and they don't know what to do, and we're therefore just going to do whatever we can to help them? Okay, takanti hu da'avi rabbanan gabe yatme, and therefore liktanim avi rabbanan ligdolim lo avi rabbanan. The whole idea is to help these poor orphans, and these poor orphans are more poor or nebach if they're young, but if they're older, then they can take care of themselves. O Dilma, or perhaps Mishum de Lomasik Adata de Malve, de Meat Love, and Nafli Nixe Kamayatme, the Haveli Noel Delet, Hilka Habilu Dolim Navi. Okay, this is a long sentence. Let's try to explain. What's the reason why they said you get Beinonit in general? You get Beinonit for a regular creditor because otherwise no one's going to loan money. They're going to say, oh, I know I'm going to get poor land, I'm not going to loan you money. Now imagine you're loaning me money. Do you start to think, well, maybe Michelle will die and I'll end up having to collect from her children and then I won't be able to get the money back? You don't really think about that. So therefore, or not that I won't be able to get the money, I'll get it the worst quality land. And that will prevent me from loaning you money, or from you loaning me money, it will prevent you. You'll say, oh, I don't want to get from the worst land, but no, you don't think about that possibility. Because when you are loaning someone money, I come to you and ask for money, you're thinking of me and you. You're not thinking about what might happen in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and I might die and I might not be there to pay it back. So therefore, let's read it inside again. Mishum de lo masik adate de milva de meit love. He doesn't even occur to him. Lo olebedato. It doesn't come up in his head that maybe the malve the lova will die. And then I'll have to collect it from the orphans. And then I won't loan you the money, or you won't loan me the money. And therefore, it doesn't matter whether the whole issue is, it's just not relevant. You told me whether I die and my kids are young or whether I die and my kids are old, it doesn't make a difference. We didn't think about that scenario. Most people don't think about it. And therefore, in that case, we're going to say you only get the ziburi. It kind of just doesn't apply in a rare case. So we don't know what it is. So let's see. Tashma, they try to bring a source to see, maybe we can learn it from here. Ditame Abba Kashisha, Yitomim Shambru Gdolim, Bein Sarich Lamar Ktanim. Abai Kashisha had this brighta that said, when we talk about orphans, we mean even older orphans. The Dilma, now they say, wait a minute, that was referring to a different Mishnah, and that Mishnah refers to two issues. That refers to, number one, the issue that we talked about, collecting money from orphans. It also talks about what kind of land you collected from. It also talks about another issue, which is if I owe you money and then I die and you come to collect from my kids, you have to take an oath to get money. Anyone who claims that children that the father owed them money has to take an oath. Why do they take an oath? Very simply, because maybe my father returned the money. Now, it's true they have a document that says the father owes the money, but maybe there was a receipt somewhere that the father paid. For whatever reason, they still have the document. I don't know why, but we want to make sure the husband really didn't pay, so we make them take an oath. They want to get money. So now they're going to suggest the following. Maybe the Yatomim that he mentioned that are Gedolim and Ketanim, young and old, is because of what? Because of the oath only, not the issue, not this issue of the type of land. Maybe really the type of land is only for the young people to protect them. But older people who can already fend for themselves, even though they're orphans, right? Maybe still you can only collect from better land. But why would it be relevant for Gadol that you'd still have to take an oath for an older person, an older orphan, to Gadol? Because really, what's the issue? No one has any idea if the father paid the money back or not. People could take advantage. So to prevent that, a Gadol is no different than a Katan. There's a slight chance the father told the older kid a little bit more about his financial situation, but usually you wouldn't know all the details of the father's financial situation and who paid him back and who didn't. So therefore, right, avalinian ziburi lo, but maybe we really could still distinguish when it comes to the land. But in fact, the Gemara says, v'hilchata, turning now to Amud Bet, yitomim sha'amru gdolim ve'in sarich lomar ktanim. Bein l'shvua, bein l'ziburi. But in the end, they conclude whether it's ziburi, whether it's oath, whether it's the land, or whether it's the oath, we're going to treat all orphans the same. It doesn't matter whether they're young or old. All these extra halachot, special halachot we're leaving for orphans are the same across the board. Now we're moving on to the next line in the Mishnah. The case is, I stole land from you, and then I sold it to my friend. Now, you go to collect the land from my friend. In the meantime, my friend has all sorts of produce growing in that field that wasn't there at the time I stole the land from you. You demand the land back from her because it's stolen land. Now, I sold it with responsibility, with achrayut. That means if you take the money back from the person who I sold it to, that person will come back to me and say, Michelle, give me my money back. So when they collect the money, they can collect the money for the land from any land after let's say I did the sale in January, and the next month in February, I sold other land I owned to other people. And when they come to collect from me, I don't have any land. So the person I sold it to can go collect from the other person that I already sold land to in February. Okay, again, let's say I sold the stolen property to Cindy, and then I went to Miriam and I sold her property after that. Cindy can go to Miriam and say, give me the property back. Okay, now she takes the property from Miriam. She can only take property from Miriam, though, at the value of the land that I sold to her. She can't take the payroll, the extra proceeds. Okay, she cannot get extra proceeds from that land. Okay, that's the tikkun olam. She can only take it from free property that's in my hands. Okay, and if I don't have, then she's stuck. Now, by Rav Achtavoy Bar Ami, and by the way, what it means is also, this is important to add, let's say I have land, and let's say my land is poor quality land. And when Cindy wants to get her land back, she's a Baal Chov. I owe her money. So she wants to get from Benoni land, but I sold my Benoni land to Miriam. So if Miriam has Benoni land and I have poor land, Cindy can't go, okay, again, she can't take the Nechasim Mishuabadim, she can't go take from the, oh, you know what? I actually got totally confused. I'm sorry. I was describing Achila Peyrod. Okay, we're going to get to the Achila Peyrod. Okay, let's go back. Let's start again. This is much simpler. I'm sorry. We'll get back to the Peyrod soon, but now you have the case in your head, so we'll get there. If I borrowed money from you, and I borrowed money from you, okay? Now, you go to get the money back from me, and you want to take it, you can get it from any property that was in my hands at the time of the loan. So if I sold it to other people, again, let's say, this is now what I was getting to at the end. Let's say I have only poor quality land left in my property, but I had land when you took the loan out that was better quality, Benoni, and you can collect from Benoni, but I sold that Benoni to someone else. You can't collect your loan back from the Benoni land, okay? Why not? Because I have B'nai Cholin land. I have land that belongs to me, even if it's worse quality. You can't collect from the better quality, even though by law, you really should get Benoni. But I sold it already and it's Mishuabad. That's lien property. It's not as available as free property. So you take it from my Ziburi property that I have in the amount of that loan. Sorry that I confused you. We'll get back to the other case. By Rabbi Achtavoy Bar'ami, b'matanah. What about if I gave someone, forget that I sold land to Miriam. Okay, so again, let's say in this case, you lent me money. You went to collect the money from me. In the meantime, after the loan, you took out the loan in January. In February, I sold land to Miriam. Now you go to collect the land from Miriam. So what if instead of selling land to Miriam, and then we say you can't take it from Miriam, even if it's Benoni and my land is poor, but instead of selling it, I gave it as a gift to Miriam. Do we say, the reason they said you can't collect from Miriam is because it's a loss for her. She bought this land. Now you're going to mess her up and take the land away from her? No, it's not. I should have to pay. It was my loan, not hers. But that's if someone purchased and they're going to lose out on their purchase. But in this case, I gave them as a gift, so they lose their gift that I gave them, right? But it was a gift. There's no sort of loss for them. The whole thing was a gain that they weren't expecting. Oh, Dilma, or alternatively, do we say, matana nami, even a matana, there's benefit. Benefit, what's the benefit? Well, what happened? I gave Miriam a gift. Now, I would say this. There's now a loss for Miriam by getting the land taken away. Why is that? Because when I gave Miriam the gift, she became indebted to me somewhat because I gave her a nice gift. So she must have done something for me. And as a result, there is some sort of a loss for her. If the land gets taken away, she'll say, oh my God, why did I do all that nice stuff for Michelle when anyway this land got taken away from me? So therefore, do we say maybe it's the same, right? Maybe we would treat this the same way. Therefore, it is like a loss for a purchaser, because it is a loss for Miriam. So which way do we go? Amalei Mar Kashisha Beredu Rav Chisda the Rav Ashi. So Mar Kashisha, the son of Rav Chisda, says to Rav Ashi, let's learn it from here. Tashma, we're going to need a little time to get through this till we see the connection. Someone's on their deathbed and they say, I want you to give 200 to this person, 300 to that person, 400 to that person. Well, you give away the money when they die. When you have a document, you usually say, whoever signed first, whoever, let's say I owe people money, whoever I owe first goes first. Or if we wrote this all down, so we write this all down and the first one gets first, the second one second, the third one last, right? They get to choose which land, they get to, let's say I don't have enough left, okay? Then the last one loses out. But we don't say that here. Therefore, now what happens? In other words, the one with 200 or 300 or 400, no one has more rights to the money than anyone else. So that means if a creditor comes along and wants to collect, they can collect from any one of these two. Because I wasn't specific. It's true, I said it in a particular order, but I wasn't specific that this is the particular order I want. But but if I say, give 200 to this person, and then after that, give to this 300, and after that 400, then then the order goes in order. Therefore, so if I owe money, they're going to take it from the last person. Now, the assumption here is what? They don't talk about, right? Ein lo, let's just go on a little more. Ein lo govem shilafanav. Okay, we go in order. Basically, whoever got last, he gets to lose his money first. If he doesn't have enough, then we're going to go to the next person. Okay, and then, but it goes in order of whoever got last. They're the one who loses their money, who loses the money first. That we collect, whatever debts I owed as the one who gave out all these gifts is going to be taken first from the last, then the second to last, and the third to last. Now, ein lo, but if not, govesh l'fanav. So ein lo govem shilifnei panav. If they don't, right, it goes in order. Now, it didn't specify which type of land. So now they're going to quote from our case. Now, this is all gifts I gave to people. Now, it seems, because it doesn't distinguish, it seems like even if it doesn't say, depending on what type of land, if my creditors come and they want Benoni land, but I gave the last land that got divvied out was Ziburit, they're stuck with the Ziburit, with the bad land. They can't go to the second one and say, I want the Benoni. So what do you see here? That it's not, right? They are protected just like buyers, basically, even though it's only a gift. So again, even though Kama Benoni to Batra Ziburit, it's clear mi Ziburit Gabe and mi Benoni Lo Gabe. We're going to take from the worst and not right from the worst to the last person, rather than the average of the second person. Again, this is all just theoretically. It could be that's the way it is, because it doesn't say otherwise. If there was a distinction, it would have said so. So Shma Mina b'matana nami avi Rabbanan takanta. It sounds like the takana was made also for Benoni, for a gift. But the Gemara rejects this in the following way. They say, what do you mean? We have three ways to understand this, which would not prove our point, which then shows this source can be understood in different ways, in which case we don't end up with an answer. You could say it's Babal Chov. Who says he said, give this money to this one, give it to that one, give it to that one as a gift? Maybe it was because he owed them money. And then they're like buyers because they're owed money and they're not like someone who gave a gift. And then we wouldn't learn anything about giving a gift. How do we know? So then the Gemara says, what do you mean? Hatznu kamar. It says give. Give is always the language of a gift. So what do you mean? Not necessarily. It's nu b'chovi. Could be give because I owe them. So, it doesn't seem, it really seems to be, it could be an obligation. I have one last question on this answer. V'lech ze shtara deman kadim. Oh no, they have two more. Why don't we see who's star? If they're all balei chov, then shouldn't it be whoever had the earlier document? They're the ones who keep their money, and the one who had the later document, like who's supposed to collect the money the last, they're the ones who lose first, and not based on what order I gave it out. So delay kashtara. It's a case where there were people who I owed money to, but we didn't have shtarot. We didn't have documents with dates, and that's which the Gemara says, what do you mean? But it said before, whoever has the first star goes. Now there we understood it differently. Now we're reinterpreting that line and saying maybe it means once we're saying the whole thing is about that they all were owed money, we can read that word differently. Don't we say then whoever had the earlier star, zoche, kodem, and then they say, no, that's b'shtar pakadita. No, we're talking about as we thought before. If I wrote a star on my deathbed, then it would go by the date of the star. Or, as we said, it's just like when I said, give it to this one, and then after that one, and then after that one. That's not a question. Now, we're going to have another way of understanding the source that will also say we're not talking about a gift, or it's not going to teach us anything about a gift. You could say it's talking about a gift, but it still doesn't give us an answer to our question. Why? V'lo kashya, don't question me and say, well, we still can prove it from here because my govem in acharon ein nifsad ela achal. The only one who's going to lose out is the last. But let's say I come, and let's say the last one got the Ziburit land, and the first guy got the Benoni land. So I can go to the first guy and collect the Benoni land, but what's going to happen? He then is going to go to the last guy and say, hey, pay me back. He'll end up with Ziburit land, but at least he'll get paid back the money he's owed. So what it means is in the end of after we do all the redividing, reshuffling, the last one will lose out. But if I want to collect money from someone, if I'm, let's say, a creditor of this guy, and I'm owed Benoni, I can go to the Benoni guy. I don't have to go to the Ziburit. Or another way, and then it wouldn't teach you about a gift, about whether, right? Because again, it could be both, and then we don't know which is right. Can I collect from the Benoni, or am I stuck with Ziburit? Alternatively, could say just Shabakulu Ladani. Maybe the case is a case where all the land was of equal value. And it's true, we suggested before, they didn't, we said it could be this was Ziburit and that was Benoni, but they're saying maybe the whole case was just talking about a case where everybody had the same quality land, and then and it doesn't teach you anything about a gift in the case where the land is of different value. Okay, now we're going back to the pay road. So now I'll be able to explain this quicker because I explained it by accident too early, but let's go back. This means, again, if I stole land from you, I sold that land to Cindy. Cindy, after that, I sold other land of mine to Miriam. When you collect your land from Cindy and Cindy comes back to me and says, give me back the land, right? Give me back what you owe, what they took from me. You promised me land with achrayut. She can get the land from Miriam, but only the value of her land, not the value of produce that she had in the property that grew once she bought it from me. The produce can only come from free property, okay, from things that belong to me and not Miriam. Why is that? My time. We're going to see two different reasons. Number one, they weren't written down. It didn't say. The deed between me and you was about the land. Between me and Cindy was about the land. It wasn't about the produce. So this is based on the fact that when Miriam goes to buy land from me, and right, we said the first thing I sold the land to Cindy in January. Then Miriam comes to buy land from me in February. And Mindy checks out what kind of liens are on my property. She sees that Cindy bought land from me, and if something happens with that land, she's going to demand it from me. So she knows there's a bit of a risk, but she only knows about the value of the land, not the value of the produce. So we can't demand from her. It's all based on, she'll negotiate a price with me knowing that there's a lien on my property and probably get less money, but she evaluated it based on how much Cindy bought the land for me for, not how much the property's valued at, not how much the produce was. It wasn't part of the agreement with me originally. So that's what Rish Lakish explains. Soon we'll get to another explanation, but first we're going to deal with this. Amalei Rabbi Abba Le'ula. But wait a minute. Look later on in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says not only that, Mazon ha'isha ba'banot. Also, Emotzin from Mishua Badin. Now, Mazon Isha is foods for women, for wives, when their husbands die, and food for the daughters. Now that's Kiman Dechtive Damu, Bekatane Emotzin. Also there you can't take from lien property. Now, everybody knows in the ketubah, that's you're committed, you're going to have food, the daughters are going to have food. So it's like it's written, even if you don't have ketubah, it's as if it's there. This is like a basic, everybody knows that. So everybody knows when they buy land from a guy who's married and has kids that there's a lien on the property that they might demand it. So why, if you say it's all about whether it's written or not, well, this is like it's written, and therefore they should be able to collect from Mishua Badin, lien property. So Amalei, no, because Hatami Ikar Hachi. That whole thing of Mazon Isha and Banot, the food supplements for them once he dies, was instituted from the get-go just from free property. And why is that? It was the whole takana that was established that we're going to make sure the husband supports the family after is only to support them from free property, not from lien property. And this whole discussion also went between Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Asi, sorry, not between them, but he quoted the name of Rabbi Yochanan starting from the beginning, the same thing that Rish Lakish said. Lefisha in Ketuvim, because they're not written. And then they said, Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rabbi Asi, v'hamazon isha b'banot dichaman dechtivu dami v'katani ein motziin. Same thing, but if you're going to say it's all about being written, well, here it's like it's written and yet you can't. Amar le meikar hachi takun. The reason why they did this from the get-go was in this way. They established it exactly this way. They have rights to mizonot from free property, but but they don't have rights to that there. And that's, if you look, the Rashi at the very end explains this. It's an endless chiyuv. So he's not going to want to do that if that's the case. And that's why they established it at the beginning, that it was only from free property, because otherwise no one would ever be able to sell their land. Now that I'm sorry, Rabbi Chanina Amar, here comes the second explanation. And this goes back kind of with what Rashi was saying. What's the common denominator between payroll? Also, by the way, it's a shebach karkaot. If Cindy invested in the land, the investment that she put in, she won't be able to get from lien property, and mizoni shan bano. According to the second explanation, it's because the three things those have in common is that there's no end to them. There's no set amount. It's not, right? The value of the land is a clear amount. Now, it's true, it might fluctuate, but it's an amount, the property value of the land. But Perot, there could be tons, right? Mazoni Shah, she could live on to 120. That could be years of food investment. The husband could die at 60. She could be living to 120. That's 60 years. Who would, right? If she's going to collect that from lien property, who would ever sell their land in that case? So since all these things are ksuvim, the rabbi said, we're not going to have, you could be able to collect that from nechasim mishuabadim, only free land that the owner themselves, the person who committed to it actually has, or the thief has, but not land they sold to other people. And then we're going to have a question on this, but we'll get back to that tomorrow. Okay, so we did a review already of the first part of the daf. Now we did only from the ziburit. We discussed is that older children also are only young. We ended up concluding that it includes older children. We went to, you can only get nechasim mishuabadim, you can't collect obligations from nechasim mishuabadim even if they're benoni land and you only have ziburit land that's free. No, they have to take it from your free land. They can't take it from lien property. And then we asked, basically, we took that as a given. We just asked, what if you gave the land as a gift and not sold it to someone? Could they take from that land? And that was a debate that we brought a source to try to prove, but then we said that source doesn't really, it's not conclusive. Okay, we couldn't learn it. We had three other possible ways of reading that source. Either it isn't a matana or it is a matana, but it still wouldn't prove anything. And then we ended with this achila perot and gave two reasons why achila perot is, you can't take from lien property, either because it wasn't written in the contract or because it's endless and, it could be any amount. And therefore, again, no one's going to be able to sell land if no one will buy land if they know that there could be some endless, unclear obligation on their part. Okay, with that, we'll finish today's daf. Wishing everybody a great day.